Beauty and Brains by Sangeetha Alagappan. It was a rather unassuming townhouse, identical to its neighbors, with neat windows of peonies and a door painted in a pleasant red. Miss Romero's School of Charm read the embossed type above the door. A bell tinkled somewhere far inside, and a few muffled footsteps later, the door swung open with a creak, framing a tall woman in spangled robes and a sharp white bulb in the doorway. "Hello, darling," she said, gesturing Fee in. "You're just in time for my next class. I'm Miss Romero, purveyor of pleasantries and enchantress of etiquette. I'll teach you when to say what to say when, and when you ought to say nothing at all." She leaned on the banister, regarding Fee, an unlit cigarette between her spidery fingers. "Pray tell, you do have a name, don't you?" she said, eyebrow arched, regarding the gangly girl on her doorstep, her disheveled hair and sickly pallor, in a coat 2 sizes too big, her knobbly knees knocking together in the cold. "Fee," said Fee, already regretting having come here. "Fee?" said Miss Romero. "Is that all of it?" "Serafina," said Serafina, "but I do prefer Fee." "Well, Serafina," she said, looking her over sharply, "we've got a lot of work to do." Fee was shown into a wide room where a few other girls were seated around, with sallow skin, white hair tucked in prim buns, all wide-eyed, with a sort of hungry look about them. The table was set with fine china, brightly polished silverware, and a cluster of candles at the center, their flames flickering high, casting dark shadows. They turned quietly, their faces gaunt in the dim light, to face Miss Romero, gazes intent, unblinking. "Now, as I was saying, we'll learn which fork to use, how to engage in polite conversation, and, yes, what to do if you're feeling a bit peckish at dinner," said Miss Romero, and with a laugh added, "Zombies must eat too." She put her arm around Fee, and Fee caught an unmistakable, overwhelming whiff of her decay, smothered deep within layers of perfume. Fee had to admit that Miss Romero hid her undeadness well beneath her pearls and proclivity for being proper. She swept through a room with the grace of one that hasn't had to hobble on withered legs. Being suave doesn't come naturally to the undead. She ate with such class with a fork, you wouldn't ever have thought her to have gnawed on a human limb before. Her bronze sprayed cheekbones gave her this ineffable aura of regality that didn't seem to be from the years she had spent in the dark, in her home, starving as the hunger for human flesh almost consumed her. She seemed normal. And Fee wanted to be her. She wanted to be a part of the outside world, not confined to her flat and her freezer of backup brains, not constantly be thinking of how gratifying it would be to smash open a human skull when on public transport. To be a regular 20-something woman who thought about Hugh Grant and fluffy dogs and going on benign first dates. She steeled herself. After 3 years of self-pity and brain binges, she was going to put herself out there and pretend to be a real, pulse-possessing woman. Just last week, Will, the bloke from the coffee shop, the one with the flat white, had asked her out, and in a fit of panic, she had accidentally said yes. It had been years since she'd been out to dinner, let alone on a date. So she was determined to knock her very not undead date dead with her charm. When the night came, she dressed in a sensible black dress and smiled widely as Will exclaimed how ravenous he was. He was dressed in a sharp blazer and looked freshly tanned, still wearing the coy smile he had on in the coffee shop. He reminded her of a boyfriend she once had in high school, a relationship so long ago and so human it felt like a dream. In the cab ride over, Will complimented her perfume, and Fee grinned, brushing it off as the good taste of her generous aunt, secretly pleased that she had passed as a pleasant-smelling human being. They were dropped off at the restaurant, which, from the look of it, was winding down. They're closing early today for a staff party. I'm sorry, I really wanted to bring you here, though, he said, holding the door open for her. The food's to die for. It was a dimly lit restaurant, with waiters in black and tables in red and wine plentiful in white. She picked the right fork as she poked at her kale salad, as any normal woman would. She was doing well. Mr. Mero would have given her a dispassionate nod. They talked about movies. Just because she was dead didn't mean she was pop culturally unsavvy. And how silly everyone was fawning over vampires, the ridiculousness of fancying someone who slept in a coffin and was afraid of daylight. But Will seemed distracted. Barely touching his food, nodding politely at her passionate take on cult fiction, and shooting ill-concealed glances at the rather attractive waiter who had taken their order. Fee couldn't help feeling annoyed. She had gone through a lot of trouble for this date. At least she knew which fork would be the most ladylike to stab him with. To calm her zombie temper and spare her rather disappointing date from becoming dinner, she excused herself to the little zombie's room, which she remembered to phrase politely as powdering her nose. As the waiter with the chiseled jawline cleared away their almost untouched meal. By now, the kitchen had packed up for the night, and the staff had left, with several bottles of champagne in tow, leaving their waiter, who had been entrusted with the lowly job of ensuring Fee and her date paid for their meal, ideally with a generous tip, and locking up after. She smoothed out her dress as she checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked almost human, having carefully been painted with swipes of foundation and blush. Mr. Mero had taught them the strange magic of contouring that seemed to have brought her skin a whole new life. She'd also taught them about controlling cravings, lest their date turn gruesome. And Fee, feeling the familiar gnaw of hunger, snuck a nugget of brain from her purse to snack on, reassuring herself that she'd make it through. Having composed herself, Fee made her way to their table at the back. As she parted the curtain to sit down, she stopped, dead in her tracks. There was the waiter, sprawled on the table, head cracked open. And there was Will, blood dripping down his shirt. Startled, he looked at Fee, his eyes wide, mouth full of brain matter. Seraphina sighed, her valiant efforts to lead a predictable human existence crushed by the corpse of a rather tasty-looking waiter. She took her seat, unfolded her napkin, and with a salad fork reached out and took a piece of occipital lobe. She was starving.